We have the technology happening tonight. It's hard to say if everything will be perfect, but it's a good chance. It's a good chance. My name is Deirdre Pike, and I'm the Justice and Outreach Program Consultant for the Anglican Diocese of Niagara. And I'm also the coordinator of the Rainbow Kings and Queens, some of whom are here this evening in their rainbow shirts from next door at St. Matt's annual general meeting, and some of you are there too. And you'll see, well, you won't see their shirts. They didn't wear their shirts, but we have some on the panel tonight as well. I'll be hosting this evening, but there's a couple of other people to give you some greetings before we get started. So first, I'd like to call upon the rector of the Cathedral, Dean Tim Dahl, to for greetings and this and that, ha ha ha. That's what they said next door about him.
Well, good evening, everyone. With us, World Refugee Day is on June the 20th, and it's celebrated, I think, 2001. And very much of the 50th anniversary of 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees. It's a day that is dedicated to honouring the strength and courage of individuals who had to flee their homes due to conflict or persecution. And I'm just delighted that we can take the opportunity in our national life to celebrate refugees and their contributions to our livelihood, and that we can take time as well to empathise and build understanding for this life, and resilience and courage, and helping us all live the right future. So that's why it's a joy and privilege to welcome you here this evening. Certainly part of our civic responsibility as a cathedral is to foster engagement with critical issues that we wrestle with in our culture. So that's why I'm delighted that we're going to have this kind of discussion this evening. We're best together a conversation about refugee rights here in Canada. Panelists, Archdeacon Bill Mounts, Executive Officer of the Diocese of Niagara, Nicholas Banksy, and who are PhD candidates studying immigration, Catherine David, Charles Van Rood from the Rainbow Kings and Queens. And you're going to be exploring all of our faith and speaking up around the world to fight to help refugees. Tonight as well, as citizens of the public justice, also unfortunately, you welcome a renewed Canadian law with provisions for migrants and advocates. Congratulations. I'm going now to offer the prayer. This prayer is written by Bishop Susan Johnson, National Bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. Loving God, open our hearts to be generous, hospitable, and welcoming to our needs. As we remember World Refugee Day in our communities, our countries, and indeed the world, to be generous, hospitable, and welcoming to the increasing number of refugees and displaced communities. Help us to be advocates for these our loved ones, your beloved children in need. And pray. And we still live to that time.
Though we are speaking about the issues that impact Canada and refugees this evening, I can't tell you the dignity with which the Rainbow Kings and Queens, newcomers to Canada, express the land acknowledgement in the space when we are together. First of all, and I'm not asking you to do this, but they ask everyone to please stand. And so everyone rises. And I'm just saying that's the example they get. So don't do it now. Don't do it now. Please have this talk. And so people at home sit down. Because we know, it's hard. There's often I've heard settlers and those of us who have learned these stories of of what has happened in our history, the treaties we have broken, the Dishwood ones, the Wampum Agreement we have not upheld and honored, the residential school system and the horrors that we recalled through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this version of the 94 calls to action. So the Rainbow Kings and Queens learned, newcomers learned the history and the reconciliation that is needed. And so tonight, as we gather, once again, we put our feet firmly on the ground and we recall with both gratitude and with a spirit of reconciliation, the friendship of Indigenous people, the turning around that we need to do in our relationships, and the continued growth in our understanding of the history and the impact of that on the present, and that we walk amidst thousands of Indigenous people on this land in Canada from every day. And we refuse to recognize them. So let us be more mindful as we look forward from this evening as we acknowledge the Indigenous people who have been here for millennia before us. Leave that there and ask Willard Metzger to come up, please. The dean mentioned that in fact there is a new book. Do you have a copy of the book? There we go. Brains the book, and Willard's going to tell you all about it because he's the executive director of Citizens for Public Justice. Welcome, Willard.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here with you this evening and to be part of the launch of this brand new book that was just released in March this year. My name is Willard Metzger, and just a brief up there description of Citizens for Public Justice. We're an advocacy lobby charity. We're based in Ottawa, and we lobby the federal government around the three policy areas: refugee and migrant rights, eradicating poverty in Canada, and climate justice. And so we're really delighted to be part of this event. The Renewed Canadian Welcome is a book published by McGill University Press and born out of CPJ's work that reimagines Canada's immigration policies through the lens of lived experience. And that's really what made it so interesting to McGill University Press. They were very keen to have that addition to the whole sector. So it's a volume that includes 11 different chapters, each covering different aspects of Canada's immigration system. It brings together 15 refugees, migrants, and advocates to reimagine what Canadian immigration policies would look like if they were based on human rights and informed by lived experience. The book inspires readers to better understand and support the movements working to uphold the rights and dignity of refugees and migrants in Canada. So I know you're going to be greatly inspired after the panel, and you'll want to pick up your copy of the book, and I'll be placed right there at the table, conveniently by the coffee and tea and snacks. So you can't pass me by. The book is also dedicated to Stephen Kaduli, and he was my first hire when I came as executive director, and he was our first full-time refugee policy analyst, refugee rights policy analyst. He died of COVID and died on the very day that he was scheduled to get his first, his vaccines, which was very, very early days. So very sad. Sad to us and the sad team and to the whole CPJ family. He came with his family from Uganda. Stephen was a kind man with a gentle spirit and unmatched vocational dedication to refugee rights, whose ideas formed the very basis of this book. He was a dedicated researcher and brought a depth of compassion, insight, and experience to CPJ's policy research and advocacy. his heart to serve the refugees and those oppressed, and his devotion to fair and just policies for all newcomers was truly inspiring. And so it's a pleasure for us to dedicate this book to Stephen Canoe. And we're also here as part of the We're Better Together campaign. One of the aims of a renewed Canadian Welcome is to help readers better understand and support the movements working to uphold the rights and dignity of refugees and migrants. So one of those movements that is currently building momentum is the Canadian Council of Refugees We're Better Together campaign, which this book launch event is also part of. So the campaign is over 200 supporting organizations across Canada, including Citizens for Public Justice, and was launched to counter the rising tide of hate and blame towards immigrants and refugees. So in Canada, we speak many languages, come from many places, and across our differences, we look out for each other. We know that we are better together, and that our Canada includes refugees and migrants. The campaign aims to tell our elected officials that we, as the Canadian public, are proud to be a country that welcomes newcomers and expects our leaders to carry on that legacy and help make this country a place where everyone can thrive. This past Saturday, as was mentioned, was also World Refugee Day, and as part of the commemoration of that day and communication, our message to Prime Minister Carney, there is an open letter that we invite you all to sign at the end of tonight's events. And so if you would come by the table, it's an online petition. So you'll note on this the QR code. If you scan that, then that's an easy way that you can participate and use your voice to tell our elected officials that we're proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our neighbors to build a better future for all. So it's a delight to be here, and it's an honor to be a part of this great occasion, and I look forward to conversations after the panel.
Thank you so much, Willard. Willard and I, the last time we saw each other, we were just waiting to be given acceptance to pass it to the House of Congress in Ottawa. We were there to do some lobbying around climate justice. So we hang out in similar circles. We've done a lot of work with Citizens for Public Justice in the past. And I've already forgiven him for releasing a list of cities they were going to visit to launch their book, and it didn't include Hamilton. And so I called them and said, I'm sure it's just a, mere oversight. And that's why we're here tonight, because we knew this conversation had to happen here with the decades of work that Bill Mouse has done and the diocese and others leading parishes in sponsoring refugees, the new work of the Rainbow Kings and Queens, and so many other things that are happening in the parts of the diocese beyond here. We knew it was a conversation we had to have. So thank you so much for being here. Last night, if you happen to catch the national news, there was, more changes around refugee healthcare, and who was shown leading the charge for people with lived experience. Africans, a Bahamian, we have a couple of Bahamian Rainbow Kings that have joined us. We had to expand from just the African countries for a minute. And last night, there they were on the national news leading the charge to say, we can't be limited to 10 sessions of therapy coming as refugees from countries. And that's just one of the issues. So I'm just saying, this is how relevant it is. As we prepared for tonight, there it is in the news. There it is again and again and again. It matters that we take leadership in this issue. So who's taking leadership tonight? Tim pretty much did my job, but just let me quickly say that Brenna Sabansky is a PhD candidate in anthropology at Mac. I really just want to say, please describe her as our immigration expert at the Rainbow Kings and Queens. She is a faithful attender. She responds to everyone's WhatsApp message when they panic that their lawyer hasn't called. So Brenna, that's the quickest way to describe Brenna, please. One of those things between almost as quickly. He's our speaker was currently serving as the executive officer and secretary of Synod for the Diocese of Niagara. And as I mentioned, he oversees the diocese's refugee sponsorship agreement with Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada. Bill has more than 2 decades of leaders championing sponsorship initiatives and advocating for refugee rights in Canada. So Bill's excellent to be here tonight. And then Catherine Michael is she's a bisexual refugee, married, came with her partner. His name is he Sunday or Monday? Monday, you know, Sunday, Monday, I think so. From Nigeria, they arrived in Canada as a family at the end of 2023, seeking safety and protection after Catherine had to leave her home country due to the conflict and uncertainty because of her sexual orientation. She has a bachelor's degree in accounting and finance from London Metropolitan University in the UK and 9+ years professional experience from the insurance sector in Nigeria. She's an active member of the Migrants and Advocates since September 2025. She now holds a protected person status. Charles, I did check on your last name. Wangui. Charles Wangui is a Kenyan-born, I always just call him Charles, my friend. Charles Wangui is a Kenyan-born individual who came to Canada seeking safety, freedom, and the opportunity to live his authentic self as part of the LGBTQ community. His journey reflects the resilience, courage, and determination shared by many refugees who leave behind everything familiar in search of dignity and protection. Before coming to Canada, Charles worked as a computer instructor in Kenya, empowering students through digital literacy and technology education. He holds a diploma in public relations from the Nairobi Institute of Business Studies and diplomas in network administration and system maintenance from the Chirono campus in Nairobi. Currently pursuing a community service worker diploma, Charles is passionate about human rights, inclusion, and supporting vulnerable communities. As an active member of the Rainbow Kings and Queens and a protected person in Canada, he brings both professional knowledge and lived experience to conversations about refugee rights, belonging, and the importance of creating communities where everyone can live with dignity, safety, and hope. Please welcome Charles. So I'm going to kind of ask a couple of questions of the panelists, and there's going to be time for you to ask questions at the end if you have some. So please keep track of those, and we'll have a conversation for sure. As I mentioned, it's the theme, as Willard really excellently put it, the theme of this book is really about people with lived experience, the importance of the voices of people with lived experience impacting the policies that impact them. This is what we need. And so when we think about Canada's immigration policies, we know that this is one area that clearly affects real people. And when policy making and shaping is disconnected from grassroots communities, it risks that policy decisions will have devastating impacts, whether or not these consequences were intentional or foreseen by policymakers or not. Intentional or unforeseen by policymakers. So, Brenna, the first question to you. There have been a number of recent policy changes, I just mentioned one of them earlier, in Canada pertaining to refugees and migrants. Can you share some more examples and the human impact they're having on people right now?
Yeah, so we touched briefly. I think my terrible. Better. Yeah, so we touched briefly on the changes to the Intro Federal Health Program, which is healthcare insurance, healthcare coverage for refugee claimants, and also for resettled refugees. And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just to say that this is really a big deal because for many, many people, when they first arrive, they may not have had access to healthcare for quite a while, and they're likely living in poverty. And so a reduction in healthcare coverage can have really severe impacts, that can also make things worse and more costly in the long run. So it's bad policy, and it's bad policy that really impacts people, and increases their suffering. Another recent policy change that came about was the passage of Bill C-12. You might have heard about it. It started as Bill C-2, and then a section of it was taken out and became Bill C-12, and it was passed in March. There are a number of issues with it, and many civil society groups, including refugee advocates, raised serious concerns about the bill and its impacts, and yet it was passed anyways. And one of the provisions of the bill that I particularly want to focus on right now has to do with a limit on when a refugee claim can be made. So previously, in theory, one could come to, if you were facing persecution, you needed to flee your home country, and you came to Canada. At any point when you determined yourself to be at risk, you could then make a refugee claim in Canada. Now, after the passage of this bill, you have to make the claim within 1 year. There are, specifics about when it came into effect and whatnot that I won't get into, but the immediate impact, because this provision was retroactive, was that there are people in our community here in Hamilton who made a refugee, came to Canada, were here for a year, under whatever circumstances. Some of them were studying, maybe the situation back home changed, so they weren't at risk when they first came to Canada, and then it became that they were at risk if they were to return home. They made a refugee claim before this bill was passed. The refugee claim was referred to the Immigration and Refugee Board, meaning everything was proceeding as it should. And then this bill passed, and suddenly they started to get letters from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada saying, oh, actually your claim is no longer eligible. So basically, you were making a refugee claim, and now you can't make that refugee claim is basically like stopped. And so you can imagine how scary that is for someone, right? Suddenly, this process that they were in that held up the possibility of safety and security is cut off. The federal government would respond and say that they have access to something called a pre-removal risk assessment. The issue is that a pre-removal risk assessment is not the same as a refugee claim. It's a process that is not as robust. There's a reason that we have the refugee claim process. And so diverting people into this other process doesn't give them the same chance to tell their story and to have the risk that they face recognized. And so it's really puts people in a very difficult position and is very, very scary for them and for everyone around them. And so these are the kind of things that we knew would happen with the passage of this bill and that are now happening and are really, really impacting people. And the impacts of this bill will continue into the future because the rule says that you have to make a refugee claim within a year of your first arrival in Canada after June 24th, 2020. So that means that from now on, if someone came to Canada, say you're a journalist and you come to Canada to attend a workshop or as a visitor, and then you go back home and 5 years later, things change and suddenly, because of the journalism that you're doing, you're at risk and you're being persecuted and you need to flee. If you come to Canada, you can't make a refugee claim because it's been 5 years. So this bill will continue to have very significant impacts on people who really do need protection and who Canada should be giving them protection to. Do I have more time or should I stop there? Stop. Okay.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's a lot taken right there, right? Like, and we know that that there's action to take afterwards. Really pointed out the petition and so on, things that we can at least feel like we're still part of these conversations. Thank you so much for that, Brennan. The book's chapter about Canada's private sponsorship of refugees program emphasizes the urgent need for meaningful refugee inclusion in policy and program development, and that this is currently lacking. That the importance of centering voices of people with lived experience, again, is the central theme. And Catherine, as a person with lived experience, Can you talk more about what this ethically looks like and why it's so crucial for policymaking to be deeply informed by the voices with lived experience? I know you're going to talk about that. We're going to test your microphone, people online and here. So as I just offer one more question to this pondering. Yes, there was a fine line between policies being informed by lived experience and following the lead of migrant-led movements for justice versus just tokenizing people's voices and asking them to do the work. So we need to navigate this well. So Catherine, how do we do that? How can we ensure that we're really accessing the voices of people with lived experience?
Hello. Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Catherine once again. I will just start by going with the program that says, only who wears the shoe knows where it pinches.
Say that one more time, the proverb.
Yes, it's only who wears the shoe knows where it pinches. Basically, it's a proverb that says, anyone cannot know what you're going through until you're in the situation. Everybody can guess. Everybody can say, oh, this is what can happen, but they don't really know what happens, within that same person. So that's why I said, that's the best program to, go about this. So I would say, the ethical inclusion of refugees in Canada policy making is the most essential, because the policy concerns people whose lives have often been shaped by displacement, persecution, conflict, loss, and the challenge of living safety and belonging in the new country. In Canada, refugee policy influences nearly every aspect of settlement. And integration, housing, language, settlement. It involves everything that pertains to anything with settlement. And it's good that the voices of those that are involved needs to be heard. Everybody can make policies. They can just go from opinions of what they've heard or what they feel. But if we don't experience it, can really put much, I would say, positive spin to the whole policy making. Right? So I'll just be fast because I know this is something that affects me personally. I just want to be short about it, else I'm gonna go all day. So we say refugee poses knowledge that institutions do not. A policymaker may understand refugee processing times through statistics. Sorry, Brenda. But a refugee understands what it means to spend years separated from families, uncertain about legal status. Brenda said it, a lot of people have started the whole process. Now you've just taken the rug off their feet. Nobody knows how that feels. Everybody can just imagine. It's the person that can know that the world is split. They don't know where they are right now. They're in limbo, basically. So these experiences reveal realities that administrative data don't often misses. The emotional burden of uncertainties, the practical barriers of accessing services, the effect of trauma of daily life. Challenges with credentials, recognition, and employment. He is a computer visa from wherever he is. He can't access that here because he has to do other books to be able to do that. I also have my qualifications. It's not something I can just, move into because of that boundaries. Experiences of discrimination and exclusion. Also, refugees are often spoken about rather than listened to. Historically, refugee policies discussions have frequently framed refugees as objects of concern, recipients of aid, or policies problems to be managed. The ethical approach challenges this framing Refugees are not beneficiaries of government programs. They are community members, workers, parents, students, leaders, and citizens in community. Their perspective should therefore be understood as contributors to public decision making rather than request for charity. You know, most times when I go out, I feel I am more proud to say I'm bisexual than telling somebody I'm a refugee. The word now looks, you know, kind of degrading because you feel like you are seeking for arms. So that's why I said, you know, I feel more proud being bisexual. You know, everybody accepts me that as a refugee, I feel ashamed. That's what the word now means to me. And I know to, you know, my fellow refugees, I can speak of it. So these experiences help expose hidden barriers. Hidden barriers including information available only in English and French here in Canada. So I don't even English or French. You know, I belong to, most of us belong to a group that is specifically told you can only type in English. Anything else you can't. We're never talking about French, but all the African countries have all the, you know, other language that they speak, that's the only thing they understand. But once they get here, they have that period, they can't speak to anyone. I have been to the clinic one day. I was there with my kids, we were trying to have the dental work done, and I saw a mom and her daughter. She can't be more than 8 years old. She understood it, but the mom didn't. And the nurse had to speak to the daughter, to speak to her mother. And in my mind, I'm like, what if this was a very, very sensitive information that a child should be or cannot comprehend? The message will not be received by the mother because the child is just going to say it the way she understands it. So, that is a barrier for this one. The ethics of, yes, so we have digital literacy barrier exists. I was telling Brenna, I was the one that filled my, what's it called? My permanent residence form, and she was like, wow, it's a long form. And a lot of people have to go to the other to help them do it. Not everybody has that privilege to be able to sit down and do that themselves. And if not for kings and queens that will tell you, look, bring it here. We have somebody that will do it for you for free. A lot of people pay money to do these things. It's not, they don't have the money, but they have to do it. So that's another thing. Why does this matter in Canada? Canada also presents itself as a humanitarian leader in refugee resettlement. And if that commitment is to be genuine, refugee inclusion cannot stop at admission and protection, right? It must extend to policy development itself. Policies concerning settlements, services, language programs, employment support, refugees health coverages, housing assistance, family unification are most essential when refugees participate in shaping them. Otherwise, there is a contradiction between welcoming refugees as members of the society and excluding them from the position of the same society.
Thank you. Thank you. Pray for the child. Another key theme of the book is the important role of civil society in refugee and migrant rights, advocacy, and welcome. Dr. Jeffrey Cameron, who actually is a prophet back, writes his chapter specifically about the role of religious groups in refugee law and policy in Canada. Citizens for Public Justice and the Anglican Church are both groups inspired by their Christian faith, Act for Justice in Canada. So Camille, one of the most well-known examples of the influence of religious groups in refugee policy and law is the private sponsorship of refugees program, and you have been deeply involved in this work. What are some of the positive impacts on sponsors and the broader community that you've witnessed as a result of welcoming refugees into the church and the community at large?
So the private sponsorship of refugees program goes back to 1979, and it was implemented as a way of adding capacity for refugee sponsorship in Canada, right? So the government makes a commitment every year, and private sponsors go above and beyond that commitment, which magnifies the impact that we have as a country through the private refugee sponsorship program. And I'd say, in terms of the impact on sponsors, it's always transformative, right? And it's transformative in a couple of ways. First, it's a way that is so tangible in terms of that love of neighbor to which we're called, right? And welcoming refugees to the communities that we live and move and have our being is a really tangible outworking of our faith to love our neighbor, be that our next door neighbor or our global neighbor. So that's a really a positive impact. The other thing I would say is it's a really perspective inducing initiative when you welcome someone to a community and get to experience the community through another set of eyes. And how many times have I worked with a sponsorship group, and at the end of a sponsorship period, which is a year, they come back to me and said, I had no idea the challenge with this in our community, be it transit or be it the cost of housing or often at the end of a sponsorship, if a family needs to transition to Ontario Works or Ontario Disability and Support Program, the woefully inadequate grades. And that's often such an eye-opening moment for sponsors. And I think they take the experience of sponsorship and move it to advocacy in lots of ways, and have conversations with their local politicians or their MPs or MPs. And I think we have that gift of seeing our own context through a fresh set of eyes. So that's a really important impact that often comes through sponsorship. The other piece I would say is about meaning making, right? We all want to make a difference, and knowing that we're helping to make a difference as sponsors by offering a place of welcome and safety and fresh start for many folks who have experienced all sorts of persecution and trauma is really important for the life of sponsors, right? And also communities. And you know, I often say that love is a renewable resource, right? You can't get enough, and the more you love, the more love propagates, right? And I think refugee sponsorship is one of those examples where you know, we're able to make meaning through that initiative and to further that way of love in ways that just keep expanding. So that's a really beautiful impact of refugee sponsorship as well.
Do you have numbers? Like how many churches in the diocese have sponsored?
Yeah, so in the kind of 3 years after the Syrian refugee crisis, we welcomed over 300 refugees to the diocese, and I think in the last 4 or 5, in the last decade or so, about 500 refugees. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Charles, we're not forgetting about you. We heard the beautiful dedication of this book, in fact, to Stephen Kaduli, offered by Willard Ugandan, which many of the first Rainbow Kings and Queens were Ugandan, and then Kenyans, large part, and then Nigerians and so on. Anyway, you know, with that dedication, Stephen talked about the different kinds of border walls that refugees face. And he said, Although Canada does not find it necessary to have a big, beautiful border wall to deter immigrants, it does have 6 non-physical border walls. 4 of those walls are geographic: the Arctic, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and the Canada-US border. The 5th wall is bureaucratic, and the 6th is social exclusion. Charles, you made it in past those walls, into the physical borders of Canada. What are some of the barriers to welcome and inclusion within Canada's borders? What are some of the barriers, and what are some of the things that have helped you feel most welcome and secure? So barriers and most welcome and secure.
Thank you again. So my name is Charles O'Boy. I'm the third side. Now,
If you're gonna hold it, you might as well.
as your my name is Charles O'Boy. I'm from Kenya. I'm a COVID resident. I came to Canada 2020, December. After I got a job, I was getting a job in Kings and Queens. That was, I think, one of the first university projects in Queens. Those used to help buy and take people things for places like furniture, food, and everything. That's how I came to buy. Now, one of the biggest barriers is feeling of the start of range from nothing. I mean, refugees are really carrying pain, trauma, and uncertainty. We leave behind our families, friends, careers, cultures, and places where we once called home. We are right here to hope, but also with fear. We must learn new systems, find housing for employment, and rebuild our lives and carry the emotional weight of everything we have lost. As an LGBTQ refugee, there is also the challenge of living from years of protection, fear, hiding. Also, after reaching that safety, the scars will disappear overnight. Many of us are learning the first time what it means to be openly and authentic without fear. Also, what has happened in our state as the people who chose to see me not as a refugee, but as a human being. The kind of community members, settlement workers, educators, friends, organizations such like the people, kings and queens, and John, that help me feel that I belong. They listen to my story, believe in my potential, reminding me that my life is still a hard burden. The greatest gift God has given me is not only protection, but also the opportunity to dream again. That's why I went back to school. To study, to contribute and to build research, and to imagine a future that translates possible. That is what true welcome is today. It's when some people have to move from simply surviving to living. Thank you.
Catherine, I wondered if you could follow up on that just a little bit, and as we seek to better understand the experiences of refugees and migrants themselves, I wonder if you could share some of the barriers that LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers face regarding Canada's external physical borders. What are some of the barriers for refugees in getting to Canada in the first place?
All right. Barriers faced by the LGBT community, refugees and asylum seekers will be your challenges experienced by other, migrants, because these barriers can affect their ability to reach Canada safely, make a refugee claim, and receive fair treatment during border or immigration processes. And these barriers I will list them, but generally I'll just discuss bits and pieces of them. Difficulty obtaining travel documents and visas. I think most of us can say that with all confidence that is one of the most difficult. My own case may not be the same as everybody else's because I usually travel. So I had, my travel documents basically before, and my visa was even processed a year before I had, my own crisis. So it's, different for me. But somebody, on the other hand, might not even have, because say my country, for example, the only time we would have a passport, most of us usually get an international passport as a form of identity. Like, the way we have driver's license, a lot of people just get it. Not because they want to travel, but just because this is my identity, that's it. So a lot of people don't usually want to use it for the purpose to travel. But once the circumstance shows up, you want to use it, right? But in all the fact that, oh, you want to, because you're fleeing, you don't know what else, you don't know what to take. The most important thing is you. And whatever you have, right there. You might not think of that document at that time, but when you need it, you better get it. And it's not something you can get like that. You have to process it. So if you're already in the process that you're fleeing from somewhere and you want to process a document, no, that's not going to come. So that is one of the barriers that we go through trying to travel. Visa processes, that's another thing on the time. A lot of people that recognize themselves as bisexual, you can't put that in your documents. It's not something for Nigeria. It's like you'll be criminalized being bisexual, LGBT community altogether. So you can't put that in your passport or bisexual and things like that. So at the point of entry that you want to say, oh, I am bisexual, you don't have the documents to prove it, but you are bisexual. So those are one of the problems we have. Then the Safe Third Country Agreement, call it the STCA. This is an arrangement between the US border and the Canadian borders. That's I would have to read that out, so I don't. It's an agreement between Canada and the United States. Generally requires refugee claimants to seek protection in the first safe country they enter. For LGBT community or asylum seekers, this can create barriers because they may fear discrimination, detention, or inadequate protection in the US. So I think I told Pike this. This is a personal experience from mine. She asked me, when did you claim asylum? Did you claim on the border? I said I couldn't. She asked me why. I said, once I saw immigration officers, it took me back home to you seeing a law enforcement agent. So what is going through my mind is, if I declare here, I am at the risk of being deported. So I couldn't have the confidence enough to, say, you know what, I'm declaring at the port of entry. So I couldn't do that. It took me over a long. So, these are the barriers that we go through. A lot of people think, okay, this is it, they can do it easily, but not everybody. Everybody has different traumas that they go through. So this is what I see authority, and even when I was even in, anytime, I think the first time I was able to fully be myself was when I spent time. And that was like more than a year. Yeah, even though my process has started, but I couldn't speak to it. Anytime I hear siren, even if it's the fire service or anything, I just breathe. That is my personal experience. So that is something that we definitely go through. So when you're coming in, everybody with their different experiences, they may not be able to know what, because I will take, or because I will this, because I will that. So that's what you do. Take that out. Another one is fear of border officials and disclosure, basically what I've said. A lot of people cannot fully say, oh, I'm bisexual, because it's not something, you know, that's really proud of from where I come from. I was telling that this is something I've held back for more than 30 years. Not something I can just see everybody. No, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy. That's why I said we go through it. So you know what it takes. You know, so the very first time I spent everything was out, emotionally, everything. That was the first time, because that was the first time I was able to speak to someone that understood what I was going to do. I'm married, like I said, but my husband doesn't understand what I am going through. He's not in my situation. You know, he's the love he loves me. That is no question, but he doesn't understand. So there's nothing I can discuss with him. He just knows the, you know, whatever everybody else. I can't speak to him with that depth, but I was able to do that. So another one that's, you know, most of LGBT community faces lack of evidence of LGBT and identity. LGBT is, it's not most of the time you come to the border and you say, oh, you're running because of ethnicity or whatever. Those are something physical that you can, you know, show. But being an LGBT person is something that has to come from your testimony. You don't have evidence, you don't have proof. You say, this is it. So if you are not believed, that is it. So those are one of them, another barrier. I think I would say this is more or less the most important, which is the financial barriers. Canada, to most of our countries, is not something you take a £2.85 bus fare to. It is very, very expensive. And it is not everybody that is well to do that has the ability to that. Visa processes. So a lot of financial, because once you get there, you have to rent a connection, you have to do a lot of things. These are things that are very, very expensive. And you didn't put yourself in this situation, you're saying, where do you get the money? So that is the most important. I believe that, you know, most LGBT communities, like us, go through. You know. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you very much. I'm reminded that we do have people listening online, so I keep going back and forth, sorry for the distraction. But it is important that we make sure that they can hear, and so that's good. And so I'm going to make sure that you have the right microphone that happens. Brenna, one of your research focuses is how refugee claimants are welcomed and find belonging. In your research and involvement in communities of refugee claimants, what are some of the ways in which we as civil society can contribute to fostering this renewed welcome and sense of belonging?
Thank you. Many of the people I've learned from are sitting in this room, so I hope I'm giving you this question justice. I think of fostering welcome and belonging as occurring on two levels. So there's the human to human level, and then there's also the policy level. So I want to begin by telling a short story that will illustrate where the human to human level comes in. A refugee claimant I know from East Africa told me about going to a church not long after she had arrived in Canada. She went with some other African refugees. They hadn't been to this church before. They walked in, they sat down, no one spoke to them. People who were sitting nearby got up and moved away. They left and they never went back. Some months later, I was in a different church. I heard that story, I didn't witness it. But some months later, I was in a different church where there are a number of refugee members. And I asked one of them, why do you come here? Because it was clear that something good was going on, because people were there and were coming back. And he said, people say hi to me, they ask my name, and they seem genuinely interested in me and in how I'm doing. And I think that the beginning of welcome is really that simple. It's about being open to people, it's about paying attention, it's about reaching out, having an interest. It's also about responding when people ask you, you know, how you are, how your day went, right? So it's about developing relationships, and relationships of welcoming each other and of belonging together. And I think a key point about this that's made continually by many refugees, refugee migrants, advocates, and I think also comes up in this book, is that this is not just something where Canadians, you know, offer a welcome to refugees, right? This is something that we create together, where refugees are also welcoming each other, are also welcoming Canadians or those who are more established into community with them. And so I think, yeah, that human to human interest and engagement is the beginning of welcome and the beginning of belonging. In terms of refugees and migrants in particular, there are challenges that people face that are above and beyond what many Canadians might face, which Catherine and Charles have talked about a little bit. And so I think part of it is also responding to those challenges, right? Whether it's making sure that people have furniture when they move into their first apartment, or helping them navigate bureaucracy, or whatever it is, you know, every person is different, which is why relationships and listening matter, so that one can then have a sense of, you know, what is it that this particular person needs. I think it should be clear that these are things that also apply to anyone, you know, it's not specific to newcomers, right? As both Charles and Catherine pointed out, newcomers are people. Thank you. And my papers are all running away. The other thing that I think is really important in creating communities of welcome and belonging is advocacy. So we've talked a bit about the policies that make people unwelcome, that make it difficult, if not impossible, to belong. And I think what we see, Will was talking about this in terms of sponsorship, is that those relationships, this connection, often feeds into or leads to advocacy, because one becomes aware of what the issues are. And it's important to speak up. You know, the kindest community response, the best relationships can't overcome forced family separation at the hands of the Canadian state. Welcome cannot even begin if someone is turned back by the Savior Country Agreement. The work of welcome is partially undone when someone finds out that their claim is suddenly ineligible due to the passage of Bill C-12. Donations and financial support from community members are not a substitute for more affordable housing or higher social assistance rates. So these things I think need to work in tandem. You know, good policy means nothing if people don't feel welcomed by the people in their communities, right? The relationships, the reaching out, the belonging together really matters. But the most caring and committed community response and the best relationships cannot overcome the harms of policies that deter migrants and make them unwelcome.
Good points, some really good points. Well, you brought up advocacy, so Bill, how are we doing there? You know, I actually, some of the Rainbow Kings and Queens went to Queens Park with me on a GO bus. About a dozen went and engaged with a rally outside Queens Park about social assistance rates. Again, lived experience, they're on social assistance, they know it's not enough. So they know that it's a country we can make our voices heard. So Bill, can you share some of the ways in which the Anglican Diocese of Niagara is engaged in partnership, advocacy, and resistance to work for the rights of the refugees in Canada?
Yeah, no, I got that. I think my mic's the good mic on the lunch here. I think the three are really intertwined, right? And chapter 9 of the book that we're launching or celebrating tonight really kind of goes into that in a really beautiful way. Partnership, the church at its best relies on partners, right? And we engage in all sorts of partnerships. I think of, the Syrian refugee crisis and the wave of refugee sponsorship that happened. Many of those sponsorships of the 25,000 refugees that the government permitted to happen through private sponsorship, and sponsorship agreement holders like the Diocese of Niagara were kind of uniquely positioned to support that movement. And it was breathtaking to behold. The year before that initiative was announced, I think we sponsored 12 refugees as a diocese. I think we were close to 150, and then continued on. And that wasn't just our parishers. That was people who have never connected with the church before who said, I want to sponsor and be part of a sponsorship. And it was just amazing to behold how community groups organically came together to welcome refugees, right? And that was a really proud moment, I think, for us as a country to recognize the need that was set before us, to open our doors and our arms so lovingly and caringly. And so the city of Hamilton, invited me to speak in council chambers and say, tell us more about how to sponsor refugees. And that was a unique partnership moment in the life of this city that we're situated in. And there's other ways of partnership. I think of our relief and development organization alongside Hope, right, which has a fundraising initiative, and most years it's geared towards supporting refugees who are living abroad, often in refugee camps, and providing kind of basic services and dignity to enhance their experience while they await either a safe return to their country or resettlement. So that's a partnership that the church can support in terms of our neighbors abroad. In terms of advocacy, partnership is another thing, right? So, the great work of Citizens for Public Justice, or the Canadian Council for Refugees, or the Canadian Council of Churches, the ways in which we can come alongside the advocacy efforts of those groups and collectively add our voices together in a profound way. It's amazing. And all three of those organizations have been at the forefront of refugee rights and advocacy. And, when I was the social justice coordinator for the diocese, it was wonderful to be able to say, CPJ is putting together this initiative. Let's come alongside and add our voice and amplify the effort. So that partnership is a really important way in which the church can kind of come alongside and work collaboratively between and beyond our churches to further the common good. Advocacy also, happens in sometimes creative ways as well. I think of the Sponsorship Agreement Holders Association. It currently, has seen rather sweeping cuts to the number of refugees that are targeted for resettlement in 2016 or 2026. Must be the time warp here. 10 years, 10 years ago. We're aiming. I think the government's target is 16,000 refugees, right? And that's drastically lower than the previous year, which is lower than the year before that. So the Sponsorship Agreement Holders Association is moving a campaign that in 2027 will move the resettlement target 27,000 refugees. Because the impact of those cuts is that the number of refugees who have been in the queue for resettlement is prolonged, right? So we have some cases that have been approved for sponsorship and have been waiting for 18 months to 24 months just for their visa to be granted, right? And for travel to be arranged. And that's a huge impact, especially for someone whose claim has been adjudicated and approved by the government, and really we're just waiting for response to come to Canada. So some of that advocacy that we can do collectively is really important. I think of the Safe Church country agreements and the work that the court case that was brought in Canada by some of the coalitions that I mentioned has been really important as well. The last thing I'll mention is resistance. And partnership and advocacy and resistance all go together. But I think, and unfortunately these things tend to cycle. When I was, starting out in terms of some of the refugee rights, there was an immigration minister at the time who talked about bogus refugees, right? And the rhetoric was really abhorrent at that time. And I think for 3, maybe 4 years in a row around World Refugee Day, we gathered at the federal building here in Hamilton and talked about care and archives, right? Because at that time the government had slashed the interim federal care program, right? God works in mysterious ways, and I found myself standing beside doctors for refugee healthcare, and that doctor beside me with a stethoscope and medical jacket, and me in a collar, together advocating for the restoration of the interim federal health care program. And it took 3 years and a change of government back in 2016. That advocacy and that resistance for both witness and the interim federal health program were reversed and restored. And so that's an important witness, and it takes our collective action and a good bit of prayer and hope and persistence to see that happen. But we also need to kind of continue to be vigilant, right? Because as we see in this year alone, some of the cuts to the interim federal healthcare program have creeped back into the system, right? And even some of the rhetoric around refugees has come back into our dialogue. And so we need to continue to be vigilant and continue to be advocating for refugee rights and for generous and here in Canada.
Absolutely, this is definitely the time to if we lost something, to pick that up, stay engaged or get engaged. In this space with the Rainbow Kings and Queens, we had our local member of parliament, as and Brandon, his staff came, and they're quite available for our members to reach out. So, some of those relationships are important, but we haven't had the Minister of Immigration and Refugee and Citizenship Canada, but boy, it'd be nice if he brought in the room, or she.
I meant like Dia.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. She's hard to get a hold of.
Yeah, she's harder. Charles, what would you want to say though? That minister walked into the room. So as we wrap up, this is our last question. We're going to envision the Minister of Immigration and Citizenship, Refugees and Citizenship Canada comes in the room. What would you want to say to her in terms of your vision for whatever you Canadian wealth would look like from a policy and human rights perspective? And as I come over to you, I want to get you to speak as so they want to hear you right home. So.
Okay. If the Minister of Mission is here, first I'll say thank you. Thank you because behind every refugee file is a human life. Behind every decision is a person who may have reflected violence, persecution, rejection, or fear. Canada willingness to offer protection gives people a second chance at life. But I will also say that a new Canadian welfare should go beyond opening the door. It should be about helping people find a home once they walk through that door. For me, I think welfare means creating a system that accommodates the management of every refugee. It means ensuring that people have access to affordable housing, mental health support, education opportunities, employment opportunities, and strong community connections. It means reducing barriers that make newcomers isolated and struggling to the most vulnerable period of their lives. Our institution as an LGBT refugees is seen and supported through policies that understand the unique challenges they face. Many arrive carrying trauma and execution simply because of who they were. They need space where they can live, belong, and live openly without fear. Most importantly, I will encourage the government to listen directly to the people who live experience. Refugees are not just recipients of policy, they are partners in building stronger communities. Our voices matter because we understand all the challenges and the possibilities. My vision of an Anglican Diocese is a Canada where refugees are not defined by the suffering, but by their potential. A Canada where people are given not only safety, but also dignity, opportunity, and hope. A Canada where every newcomer feels that they are not merely accepted, but genuinely valued and welcome. Because when a refugee feels that they belong, something powerful happens. Fear begins to fade, hope begins to grow, and a person who has arrived seeking protection becomes someone who can contribute, lead, and keep out of the country and get the same chance. As I close, my statement as a refugee, I did not come to Canada for special treatment. I came looking for what every human being deserves: safety, dignity, freedom, and a chance to live authentically. Canada gave me the chance. I hope is that future refugees will not only find protection in Niagara, but also the opportunity to heal, belong, and thrive. Because the true mission of our country is not how we see people at the border, but how we help them build a future once they are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please thank every one of our panelists for their great contributions. And I wondered if anybody might have a question for one of them. Bill, Brenna, Charles, I was gonna call him Charter, but we're formal tonight, Charles. The King, King Charles, and we have, anybody have a question? Or a comment about welcoming refugees or for Willard from the Citizens Republic of Justice? Sure, you answer something. Are there questions at home? On the chat, Rena. Are there hands up behind me now, Bill? I see they have the petition online for the people that have joined us online, so they put the petition up to sign, which is great. So that's one thing we're going to do over at that table, is sign the petition, and I might get Willard to explain that again just before we go.
You are articulately right, and I'm not surprised. My mother will be 94 next month. And she says, and why are these refugees coming? Because we've done quite a few things, my mother and I over the years. And I said, well, okay. And she said, down in fact. And I said, well, no, I'm not. And she said, don't they realize they're losing some of their very best people? And I tried to explain it, of course I have that. But I think the comment I want to make that you articulated so well is that you are a richness. You are not a dependency. You are not, I think it's kind of said, not you're seeking alms. You're here to contribute. And that is what you have done. You have the richness you have provided us is remarkable. So for Catherine and Charles, tell me, is there anything else you would have to say about how we can help you share your skills and abilities and not fear for roles, general jobs, or anything we would have?
Just an option, you don't have to.
For me personally, so far so good. I would say it has not been. I've not been on the negative side, so to speak, even though the problems are there. The government has done a lot. I know it's because of places like this that has made that possible. So, I'm still going forward, and I know, like I said, a lot of all the opportunities that I had has come from here. I've spoken to Brenna a number of times, and all she has done, or all the support she has, given, has helped every step of the way. And I keep telling her, this is, whatever it is. So if I want to study, I'm just taking my turn. Right now, I know where to go, when I need to. But like I said, everybody doesn't have the same opportunity or knowledge that I do. If I know where to go if I want to. I can speak if I want to. I know the questions to ask. Like I said, somebody that doesn't have the language barrier, they may not be able to express what it means for them to whatever they want. You may not be able to express it in English. Because the way we speak in Nigeria, we have like a pidgin that, or maybe Yoruba or something. There are some words you cannot express it in English. You have to say it in your language for the person to understand the depth of what you mean. So, like I said, so far so good for me. I don't really have much. I know where to go. But like I said, it has been, a great privilege being here because it has helped me a lot. A lot of things that I had not known, it helped me so much when I was about to have my hearing. She was the person that put me through and everything. Because the trauma is not easy. You have to be, whatever you're trying to bury down there, you have to bring it back up. And she gave me the possibility,
And Brenna is unique.
Yeah, she is.
When I say is, we need outreach workers that work with the rest of the community, Brenna's skill.
Charles is gonna answer.
For me, I think I second that so far so good. Just that people with us is able to communicate to affect by my goal is another countries who are not able to speak for themselves. So what I will ask kindly is continue asking the forums is everyone something. So that I can engage them and know what they want. Because if some of them can just come and say, I want to surprise them for them on the street, but that's a reason.
That was so something.
Thank you.
Yes. Sonia.
Yeah, my name is Jamie. For the refugee, I don't know my own personal story. There's someone that I've come to realize in the sense that as a refugee, you don't like you are applying for a job and you will be told you don't have an experience. And maybe you did you have the experience background because of you are a refugee and we don't have an experience. And what they want from you is a referral. So when they don't give you a chance to do that you studied, how do you have the experience in Canada? Because they'll tell you where you're coming from is not the same as what you like maybe in Nigeria you're in North, and in Canada they tell you you need to migrate or whatever. Okay, you have a certificate to study or to work in, sorry, to study to work in, and you can do you were trained here in Canada for the job, and you people you cannot do the job because you don't have an experience. So I don't know how this time this kind of thing gives you it makes you feel like you're not part of the country. How can someone do so many things to get a better job and you don't have an experience? I'm not speaking with abuse such words. I don't know if you can help us to put an end to such words.
Holy, thank you so much for being brave enough to give her a round of applause for asking that question. there's some struggles of trained security guard and trained PSW showing up and finding out, or you don't know which one you don't have Canadian experience, it's all. So these are the messages we have to get out, as Bill was saying earlier, the kind of negative messaging that happens when we hear that. As allies, we have a responsibility to interrupt that immediately. And what do you mean Canadian experience? They have this. Yeah, honor the experience, honor the person, like we've heard tonight as well. Sarah didn't hand over here, I thought I was Sarah, thanks.
Thank you. And it seems like we're in a time when there's a lot of concerns about affordability among Canadians, a lot of concerns about immigration among Canadians, so we have a great gathering here this evening, but many of the people here are people who are already working in this space. It's like say. So what are the recommendations for getting out around the market and to our parishes? I just feel like it's really difficult times right now to get the positives, all the benefits. We spent the last 10 years advocating for how newcomers benefit and but yeah, it's just like I feel like a broken record. And how do you break through and actually share that? So I think this is a good space to ask.
I do too, I think Bill Most is a good person to answer.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is a question that, I mean, even on my Facebook page, I put a picture of the Rainbow Kings and Queens that we took from just last week for our pride picture. There were 120 of us, and underneath, there's a woman that started asking, why are you helping those people? Why don't we help our own? It's our own. These are mine. Oh, yeah.
I think we need to find the places and spaces to continue to celebrate refugees and to kind of raise some of the cares and concerns. I had the privilege of speaking to the Council of General Synod, which is our national governing body, 2 weeks ago, and that was a unique moment for us to lift up the cares and concerns related to refugee rights and refugee sponsorship for that body of Anglicans. Hadn't happened in a while, but it was like kind of national forum for us to do that. At that meeting, our national Archbishop reminded folks that he has encouraged parishes from coast to coast to coast to mark a Refugee Sunday, and it doesn't have to be the Sunday closest to World Refugee Sunday. Certainly, it would have been lovely had all our parishes done that this past Sunday. But any occasion, any Sunday is a good Sunday to lift up and do some awareness raising of the plight of refugees. When I started this work a number of years ago, there was a statistic that never had there been so many refugees since the Second World War, right? And every year since that time, and it's been well over a decade, the number has increased and increased and increased, right? That's very one. And yet, I think we only pay attention to it when there's an Alan Kurdi moment, right? Which galvanized our collective national awareness. And so we need to kind of be thinking about how we can create those moments and to share the stories and to share the needs in the places and spaces where we live and move and have our being in, just an ordinary day.
But it's a good observation, Sarah, it happens that people showing up. Last one. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the Canadian Council for Refugees also commissioned some research on specifically the messaging to use and what kinds of messages work well in terms of trying to increase support for refugees and address some of these concerns and which messages fall flat. So maybe something that all of us could do tonight or this weekend is to take a look at that, so that we have that language when we're, answering those Facebook posts or talking to people. But yes, Sarah, I agree. It's a challenging time. It's an important question. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that also support for refugees in Canada tends to follow trends that like match with how people are doing economically. So, you know, we can expect it to get better, we can also expect it to get worse. Knowing that is maybe helpful, and also, recognizing that some of those questions have been placing a real hardship and real difficulty, so finding ways to connect with people, that are not dismissive, but that also point out that refugees and other newcomers are being used as a scapegoat, and that the things that are, you know, the policies and whatnot that are being put in place are not actually gonna make those problems go away. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Thank you. Well, we just got 2 minutes left, and I'd like to give those 2 minutes to Willard to just talk about the advocacy we're gonna do here, and talk about the book, and say goodnight to us.
Well, thank you for the very rich conversation and tying a couple of the pieces together. So the research that you were referring to, the Canadian Council of Refugees, that was, that's all part of the We're Better Together campaign. So the letter is just one piece of that larger campaign. They did a lot of very good research. And to find that, the political rhetoric is wanting us to believe that most Canadians are against refugees coming to Canada. That's not true. It's a small minority. It's a vocal minority. There are the biggest bulk of Canadians are in that soft middle. They're not sure exactly what they think, and so this is the opportunity to change that rhetoric, and that's what the whole campaign is about. We're better together, and they give you some very good things to start messaging to talk about. And then I would just say generally in advocacy work, just don't get discouraged, keep doing it. You know, I keep thinking that every politician actually would welcome protests at their offices, because that's what they need. They need that kind of platform to go into their cabinet and say, look, if you want me to get reelected, we better do something about this, because my constituency is angry and they're not gonna vote for us. They're not gonna vote for me unless we do something about this. The biggest enemy of advocacy is apathy. And apathy is basically what good will it do anyway. That's the biggest enemy. So that's where the way it is. It will make a difference. There is a lot of people power when we just need to keep getting that people power together. And maybe I'll just close with one example. We have public justice interns, so young graduate students. And it's always a tough time because we have so many qualified students. We actually students that we can only hire one. But I think that this was one interview with a young woman that said, you know, I go to Parliament Hill and I protest, not because I'm angry, because this is because of climate change. She was advocating for taking climate change seriously. She says, I go there not because I'm angry, but because I love God and I love God's creation. I thought, see, that's worship. That's a whole different form of worship. We show up, we make our protest signs and say, look, it's love for our neighbor that drives us here. That's why we're here, and that's what we're going to keep doing. So,
Amen.
strength to you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. That's it. He was right. Thank you for being here. Please go over and sign that petition. There's coffee, there's some cookies. Let's have a chat together. See what else we can do. One more round of applause for Bill, Brennan, Charles, and Michael. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening and watching online. Thank you, Queen Elizabeth, for your question about the mothers who are here without their children. We are starting a group for that. And also for fathers who are here without their children. So we will be doing more and more to support refugees because the government might be backing away a bit. So we will be there. Thank you for being here tonight.